everybody. Welcome to another episode of Hawk Blogger Mornings. I am Brian Nemhauser. You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, Blue Sky, TikTok, all the places at Hawk Blogger. And tried to get something set up today. Was planning on maybe even doing the show outside, but got a little lazy. Decided instead to set up a snow cam for all of you who are elsewhere in the world who may not be able to enjoy the view from a little bit of snowy Seattle or getting it coming down out here. And man, beautiful view, and wanted to share it with as many folks as might enjoy it. So cozy up on your couch, wherever you are, get under a warm blanket, get your hot cocoa, and let's talk some Seahawks football. Appreciate everybody with the well wishes. Yeah, I am feeling a little bit better today. Last night, first night, went to bed without having to take NyQuil, so that was nice. And slowly but surely healing up. I know I'm going to get a text from my mom probably right after this show. Are you feeling better? And the answer will be, yeah, I'm feeling better. So appreciate all that goodness coming my way. And there's a lot to potentially talk about, honestly. I kind of was going back and forth about where to go. I will not be spending time talking about the Luka Doncic trade. I will not be making comparisons between that and what an NFL trade would be. I certainly will not be saying that the Luka Doncic trade is the equivalent of trading Lamar Jackson for Joe Burrow, because that was really a poor, poor tweet that I wouldn't want to repeat. But yeah, I think the thing that really I want to spend the most time on is I watched the Senior Bowl yesterday for the first time in I don't know how long. And I don't know if any of you watched it. I wouldn't necessarily expect anyone to watch it. It's an all-star college game. Usually it's kind of like a glorified scrimmage. You know, these kids are doing their best to make sure that they don't get hurt. And, you know, it's not necessarily meant to be that competitive of a game. It was a good game. I thought there was a number of good plays. I enjoyed watching it. I think there were some big hits that I was like a little bit like, you know, I worry for these kids who's coming out and so close to the draft. You want to make sure they all, get all the way at least to the draft without getting injured. But seemed like people generally came out healthy, and there were some really outstanding performances, and got to actually see some of the players I had been watching all week in practice, in game settings, and there was more to learn, honestly. Like I saw some things that I hadn't seen during the week. I saw some things that solidified my perspectives on players. I saw some things that maybe changed my perspective on some players. And I wanted to share kind of with the full view of the Senior Bowl now behind us, what I think, like, who are my standouts? Who are the people that I think you guys maybe want to start getting familiar with the names if you're not already, because I think they may be relevant to the Seahawks coming up. Before I get into that, obviously want to just remind you all, give the show a like, click subscribe. Would greatly appreciate that if you wouldn't mind. It really helps to grow the show and the community. Want to hit up towards 15,000 subscribers here on YouTube, and, you know, continuing to grow on TikTok and Instagram and all the other places. So really appreciate all the follows there. And also, before I forget, there were super chats yesterday, and this happens sometimes where I'm too quick to sign off, and then I'm like, oh man, I really blew it. And so I think I took screenshots of the super chats from yesterday. Did I do that? Yes, I did. Good for me. And one of them was from Chris Clark. So I don't know if Chris is still tuning in today, but if you are, he gave away 5 Hawk Blogger memberships yesterday. I really, really appreciate that, Chris. That was very generous of you, and greatly appreciate you doing that. Old School Seahawk, OSS, has been a member for 6 months. Feels like 6 years. He's been here since almost the beginning. Old School says, congrats again to you and your family, Jeff. All the best to the Hawk Blogger community. Well, Jeff's not with me today, but I'll make sure to convey those well wishes to Jeff next time I talk to him, which will probably be any minute now. Bryce Coots gave away 10 Hawk Blogger memberships yesterday. And guess what? Bryce just gave away another 10 today. I mean, he is on an amazing roll. I've lost count of how many memberships he has gifted. There is a ton of free memberships available, and Bryce is leading the charge right now in that regard. Richie Brash, a member who, has been on the get rid of Geno train, get someone else in here. That's been Richie's kind of, brand. And I respect the perspective. And he said, I'll be honest, I'm not that high on Jalen Milroe after your Senior Bowl coverage. I'm all in now on a DK trade for Joe Milton packaged with some picks. Well, I'll tell you what, Richie, you know what? You and I are on the same page, at least in that regard. I would take Joe Milton over almost any quarterback prospect I've seen for this draft. Now, over Cam Ward, over Shedeur Sanders, I don't know, but it's at least a conversation for me. I was that impressed with that final game that Joe Milton played. Yes, it was a meaningless game, but the plays that he put on tape in that game across an entire game that he was able to sustain were pretty impressive. And they were plays that I didn't think that he really had shown previously. And so I talked to guys at the Senior Bowl, scouts, other people that are analysts, and I was like, if you just had access to the Joe Milton tape from the last game of the season, that's the only thing that was different, and you had access to that, and then he was part of this draft, where would he go? And they're like, number one overall. Like, consistently, that's what people said, because he put on, that was a really, really, you talk about players flashing. He didn't just flash once or twice. He flashed for that entire game, and he did things that he looked like, in some ways, like a more athletic Ben Roethlisberger, just such a big dude throwing people off. So I don't think that the Joe Milton stuff is crazy. Do I think that he's guaranteed to be great? No. But I don't think almost any of these quarterbacks have the ceiling that he does. So, take that for what it's worth. And then Hawks fan Matt, man, he has been a member for 10 months. And he says he's inching closer to the 1 year mark. Go Hawks and go. Well, it says Go Hawks and Go Hawks, I think. Maybe it's a Go Hawk blogger. I'm not sure. I kind of cut off that part of the screenshot. But anyway, just wanted to thank everyone for their super chats yesterday, and sorry for being a little delayed in getting those shared. One other thing before we get into the Senior Bowl stuff, some news, some Seahawks news, not the biggest Seahawks news. Charles London, the Seahawks quarterback coach last year, is going to the Jets in the same role. And this was reported by Tom Pelissaro. Brady Henderson has since confirmed. And I think it's worth noting that the Seahawks had already been reaching out. One of the few things we've heard reported about Seahawks, coaching changes was that Andrew Janocko, I'm not sure if that's exactly how to pronounce his name, the Saints quarterback coach was given permission to interview for the Seahawks quarterback coach position. So you'd have to maybe think that this is a good indicator that that's going to go through, or at least that Clint Kubiak has other names other than Charles London at the top of his list. So Seahawks will have a new quarterbacks coach, and we won't know exactly who that is quite yet, but Charles London has left the Seahawks. So, I'm curious, Charles London... let's double check one thing. I want to make sure I get this right. Coach, he was with the Seahawks just in 2024. Okay, so not Geno's best year, and Sam Howell certainly didn't come in looking super prepared either when he came in. So not sure, I don't know Charles London. I never met him. Don't have a lot of details other than I know some of his background, but not sure this is a meaningful loss for the Seahawks, but it is a change. Okay, so with that in mind, I've got how many names here? I have got 19 names. 19 names of players that stood out to me while I covered the Senior Bowl. And, some of these guys may not be the perfect fits for the Seahawks system. I'll try to call that out as they come up. But these were all guys that that left an impression on me. I will also probably, depending on timing, go through a few names that I came in a little bit higher on and I left a little bit less high on. Doesn't mean that I'm out. I'll say that if I am, but I'll share some thoughts on those guys as well. But mainly want to focus on the guys that I think caught my attention in the positive. So first things first, there's no order. I thought about ranking them, and I'm actually making progress on my big board. I've got, I kind of rank prospects by what I think their ceiling can be. How good can they be? I rank them based on their floor. How like if things go really poorly, what's the worst case scenario? I rank them based on positional value. I rank them based on team need. And then I also rank them based on fit. Or at least I give them a score for all of those categories. And then I kind of come up with a composite grade that lets me, arrive at my big board. It's a big matrix, and I haven't, I'm just starting to fill it out, and I'll gain more confidence in those numbers as we go. But for now, these are unordered. So I will say that. Help people in chat. Remind if they come late. This is not a rank order of 19 to 1 or anything like that. It's just honestly in the order that my spreadsheet kind of had them in, and we'll go through. There is some positional grouping here, so just not all grouped together, but a couple of those are together. So, by the way, feel free in chat if you're watching and participating, share your opinions. If there's people that you really got excited about, share in there, share why. Always great to hear that feedback. And I don't claim to be the ultimate arbiter on this, but I have learned to trust, that I've got some instinct for this over the years. Some positions better than others, but I'm just learning. I'm learning about these guys just like everybody else I think is, and we'll just kind of keep doing that together. So first guy on my list, and honestly, he would be near the top if this was a stack order list. Shamar Stewart, edge player, 6'4", 281, 34-inch arms. This guy, I kind of came in, like I knew there was a lot of hype. People were like, this guy might be a top 5 kind of player in this class, but he didn't have enough production, so he could go in the 20s. He's at 281. That's really not a good fit for the Mike Macdonald scheme. He wants his edge players to be, outside linebackers like Derek Hall, Boye Mafe, who are asked to drop into coverage. You don't generally get, even Draymond Jones had to drop down from in the 280s to in the 270s, low 270s to play with Mike Macdonald this year. So Shamar Stewart, I was just like, I don't know if that's the right fit. Honestly, I don't care after what I saw this week. I think that guy is a super high ceiling player. I actually buy into the belief and the hype that he is a top 5 talent in this class in terms of what he could become. And if you're sitting there at 18 and a guy like that's available, like I'm pretty darn interested in figuring out how to get him on your team. Like I think he's probably one of the highest upside talents the Seahawks could potentially get in this class. And what I saw from him this week was dominant bull rush, speed to power. I saw him bend and get around an edge. I saw just massive, like his get off, his ability to get off the snap and his quickness, all there. And he's physical and he's a dog. And I thought he was the alpha across all the teams that week, this past week. So Shamar Stewart's up there. He definitely got my attention and is a guy that one of my Senior Bowl faves. And I think the Seahawks would be pretty lucky if they had a chance to add him. Another guy that honestly I had noticed during the week, but man, did he flash in the game. Savion Jones, edge player from LSU. This guy played inside a lot in the Senior Bowl. I think he ended up with, a few different sacks, definitely a ton of pressures. In fact, one of the things I can do that's pretty cool, I think this is pretty cool. I can look on PFF and let's see what we've got for the Senior Bowl game. I think I can go and find out exactly how many pressures people had. And so here, Senior Bowl, they don't have the grades available yet. Darn it. Let's see if there's Senior Bowl box score somewhere I can look up. This is me just wanting to have numbers. I have practice grades from PFF, which is pretty cool. Final stats from the Senior Bowl. Well, that's a blank page. Well, that's a little bit disappointing. All right. So yeah, it doesn't look like there's an easy place for me to find what I was looking for. But Savion Jones had maybe the most pressures of anyone in that game. He's incredibly disruptive, showed a lot of twitch, interior player that also has edge in him. So, I think he's a particularly interesting guy that I hadn't spent as much time on and I'm curious about. And then another edge player did not make as much of an impact in the game, but got my attention during practice. RJ Oben from Notre Dame. He showed up in a lot of the drills. His speed, his power, his bend, his ability to corner was interesting. I don't think this is a guy. By the way, these aren't all guys you're talking about first round. These are just guys that stood out to me. I think he's a guy that could be a later round, maybe a day 3, maybe a day 2 pick for somebody who's looking for edge help. I don't think he's going to come in and dominate right away, but I saw a lot of tools there that were interesting, and I think he plays with a high motor. So anytime you can get guys that just continue to push, I think that's a pretty big deal for any coach and what they're looking for. One of my favorite players of the week. Omar Norman Lott from Tennessee. Defensive tackle, interior defensive player. He's kind of a 3 tech, could be out to a 5 tech, playing on the, kind of the big edge or big end, I should say. He's only 6'1", 295. And so he's squatty. He's like a bowling ball, but man, he gets fired like a cannonball. Like, he is just a rolling ball of butcher knives. And I think he's great with his hands. I think his feet are fire. I think he moves like staccato, just like super quick feet, great motor, great pad level, partially because he's shorter. I saw him get under a lot of guys' pads and walk them back. Really thick legs and thighs, just really powerful, like, drivetrain, so to speak, on him. I think this guy is going to be a player, and I think he is a potential first round talent that might probably slip into the second round. He's a really interesting guy. I don't know. Like, I think he can probably put on some extra weight. And so once you're he's at 295 as it is, getting over 300, then he's in the mix for something that could make sense for the Seahawks. But yeah, I really liked him. I think he's going to be an excellent pass rusher. I think he's going to be very productive for a team that gets him. Another guy, it turns out, with these defensive linemen, a guy that I hadn't noticed as much during the week, but man, did he show up during the game. Oluwafemi Oladejo from UCLA, edge player. I think he had 2 or 3 sacks in the game, the Senior Bowl game. Some of them were, one of them was a longer developing, but still like high effort play. He showed the ability to get to the edge. I don't think this guy is a day 1, probably not a day 2 guy either, but certainly showed some juice and might have snuck into day 2 with what he did during the Senior Bowl. So Oluwafemi Oladejo from UCLA, another name to start to get more familiar with. At least that's what I walked away thinking after watching the game yesterday. Another guy, now we're getting to a linebacker here. I've talked about this guy before. Didn't jump out in the game as much, and he might not even been there. Like, so many of the guys, once they make the impression they're looking for, they just bolt. So I don't even know if he was there. But Nick Martin, a linebacker, is a guy that I noticed during practice this week, showed up a lot as a linebacker in coverage. So I was impressed with him in that regard. Actually, Rick Spielman was also mentioning that about him and got some attention for what he's done in coverage during this week at the Senior Bowl. So anytime you've got a linebacker who's showing up in coverage, that's a boost nowadays. Linebackers, that's a key part, almost more important than their run defense is how they do in coverage. And Martin looked like a guy that could cover deep down the field, really handle deep drops. And for a team like the Seahawks with Mike Macdonald and what he does, that's a pretty important one as well. Okay. Next guy that I would mention, Miles Frazier. So we switch over here. Again, this is going to be a little bit random just based on the order that I sorted here. Miles Frazier is a guard from LSU, 6'5", 325 pounds. And to be honest, I hadn't really spent a lot of time on Miles Frazier coming into the Senior Bowl. If you are a YouTube member and you've taken the chance to watch some of the 1v1s, the 40 minutes of 1v1s that I put up on there from the first two practices, and you watch Miles Frazier at right guard, I believe he was number 70, but I've got the roster posted for YouTube members as well to identify all the players' numbers and so you can identify who's doing what. Miles Frazier was great. He was really, really good. Rarely got beat, very stout, anchors really well. Interestingly, like he doesn't grade as well as a run blocker, at least during the season. So that'll be curious. And as I've mentioned before, one of the other hesitations with Miles Frazier is I talked to him after one of the practices and he acknowledged, and I'm sure his scout, well, not a scout, but his agent would probably tell him not to do this, but he said that he really prefers gap scheme run blocking, and I'm just not convinced yet that that's going to be as big of a part of what Clint Kubiak installs in Seattle, knowing how much zone run blocking is a big aspect of what they do. So there might be a fit issue here. Now there's other guys on the Seahawks that already clearly prefer or are better at gap scheme run blocking. So they can't just say we're not going to have anyone on the roster that has gap scheme preferences. And who knows? You know, Gary Kubiak was on with Brock and Salk this week, and one of the things he said is everyone says, you know, we just run zone scheme and we run with undersized offensive linemen, but we run like with the offense that's going to best suit the players we have. So we don't know yet. I certainly plan to ask Clint Kubiak about that once we get a press conference, hopefully scheduled this week at some point. But Miles Frazier, for now, he checks the box as a very interesting player. I think he's a guy that if you said that he was the Seahawks pick at number 50, I wouldn't blink an eye. I think that's a great pick at 50. I think the floor is very high with Miles Frazier. And I think the ceiling is decently high as well. I think he could be a very, very solid starter. And for me, is a more interesting athlete than a guy like Christian Haynes, who last year, a lot of people were saying in a similar vein, high floor, good guard prospect. I just feel like Miles Frazier to me looks a little bit more like an NFL guard. Doesn't mean Christian Haynes won't develop, but I'm just saying I think that there's a little bit of a difference there in how prototypical I think Miles Frazier is for that spot. Next guy on the list, another LSU player, Jason Taylor's kid, Mason Taylor, the tight end, 6'4", 250. Again, another guy I hadn't watched a ton of before this week. He made some nice catches of some poorly thrown passes, and also just is pretty athletic for a guy that big. And he's got a frame where he's going to put on another, I think he's going to end up being 260, 265. Once he's spent his time in the NFL and got his big boy body, like he's got more weight to add. I don't think it's going to slow him down. I think he could end up being one of the better tight ends in this class. His father was an unreal athlete as an edge rusher. I see some of the same like nimbleness in the way he moves for a guy that's carrying around that kind of muscle. And I think that knowing what the Seahawks are going to need from a blocker at the tight end position, who's also a mover with good hands, he's also got NFL bloodlines. I think Mason Taylor, he could conceivably move into the second round. But I think he's a solid third round selection. If you were to get Mason Taylor in the third round, I think that's a great get. But he really impressed me. I think I talked to him a little bit as well. Well-spoken guy, very comfortable in his own skin. Not, you might think that a pro player's son might be a little full of himself, growing up around all that fame. He seemed pretty grounded. So really came away impressed with Mason Taylor. Next, Jonah Monheim. This is a center out of USC, and Jonah Monheim was one of the guys that, almost one of the few guys that came in there as a center. He played center in college exclusively. That's the position he is. There's a lot of other guys that took snaps that didn't take snaps during their college careers or did it part-time. Jonah Monheim is a center. That's what he is. I thought he really acquitted himself very well in 1v1s. He's very competitive. He's got an edge to him. There was one play, there's one rep in particular where, he was matched up with, I don't remember exactly who it was, but someone on the defensive line who there was the guy jumped off on the snap and Monheim was blocking him, but the right guard kind of got involved in the play, which you're not supposed to do in a 1v1. And so the defender was very annoyed. Like, he was like, that's bull. Like, you basically double teamed me on this rep. And Monheim was walking back because you're supposed to switch out after every rep. And the defender was still getting mad. And so Monheim walks back. They redo the rep and Monheim just stones him. Like, didn't get anywhere. And I love that. Like, those are little minor moments that I think give you a little bit of insight into a player and his mentality that you won't get on game film. You won't necessarily get if you're not at practice or you're not watching really carefully. And I just saw that kind of grit in him all week that, to me, made him an interesting option. Now, I don't think you're going to draft Jonah Monheim in day 1 or day 2. But if you're sitting there in the 5th round and he's available, I think he's an interesting player. So I will note that he was not the highest ranked zone blocking center, around. I think he was 224th in terms of PFF grade for zone blocking among all offensive linemen in the FBS this past season. So that may be an issue. He may be more of a gap scheme kind of guy, but still got my attention. Let me pause there, see if there's some questions or super chats I should get to. Appreciate everybody who's liking and subscribing. We got Noah Berman, who's been a member for 10 months. Unbelievable, Noah. Really appreciate the support. He says, so cool to hear your radio spots this week, Brian. The Senior Bowl coverage was fantastic. Really hope you get the combine credentials. Well, thanks, Noah, man. I really appreciate it. It was fun. It was fun being on with Brock and Salk a couple times. Fun being on with Softy on Friday. And, I try to just be available and, I don't go out there and try to get these things, but when they're interested, I'm always happy to do it. And I enjoy those conversations. So hopefully there's more of them to come. And I listen to those guys myself. I think they do. For someone who's obsessed with sports, you find the best coverage you can, and I think those guys do a really good job. So appreciate the shout, and I got my fingers crossed. I've asked for 2 combine credentials. If we get both, we're gonna hopefully get Jeff Simmons down there with me. We'll get double coverage. Going to see maybe we can get a sponsor or a partner to help make that happen. Maybe somebody can sign up as a Ring of Honor member on patreon.com/hawkblogger and help sponsor so we can get Jeff's travel expenses, help those get covered. But really appreciate it. And we're going to try to give you guys the best coverage we can. Next, Zabel Thomas, a member for 5 months. Zabel, thank you so much for your support. He says, do you think trading back in round 1 is most likely? Well, here's the thing. I think trading back in round 1 would be gold if you can do it. I don't think it makes... Let me be more specific. I think it makes sense to trade back in round 1 if you can pick up either a 2nd round or a 3rd round pick. If you're trading back and you're just adding a 5th, like you're trading back from 18 to 20 and you're adding a 5th, or no, like not particularly interested in that. I do feel like you can get some quality in the mid 20s, but it's going to depend. It's going to depend on how the board falls. There might be some players that you just don't want to move for. When Jeff and I did our draft yesterday, I think Will Campbell was there like pretty late in the round. If Will Campbell's sitting there, Kelvin Banks is sitting there, I don't know that you can pass on those guys. Tyler Warren, I will just say that's a show for another day. I'm softening my stance a little bit there. I still think he'd be a great add, but the tight end position is so good in this draft. I'm not totally convinced that you can't really address your need at tight end in day two, even in the third round, and get a really good tight end while using your first round pick somewhere else. I am leaning more and more toward either offensive line, if it's a specific level of offensive lineman, or defensive line. Those are the two leading position groups for me in the first round. And there's only a few guys that I probably would not trade out of if they were available at 18. And that'll get a little bit more clear as we get through the combine and things like that. But the other part of that, Zabel, again, great question, and thanks for being a member, is it takes two to tango. And I put out my top traps for this draft, and one of them was trading up. I think trading up in this draft is a really poor idea, especially in the first round. If other people are, thinking the same thing, finding a trade partner is going to be difficult. So, John Schneider's had years before where he's really wanted to make a deal and there hasn't been a partner. So, you got to have it go both ways. All right. So let's continue down. What are we? I've gone through 9 guys. I have 10 more to go. So yeah, we got a lot more to go. All right, here we go. Next guy on my list. You guys have heard me talk about him already. Linebacker from University of Oregon, Jeffrey Bassa. He was named by his opposing, they each have teams, American team, national team, and then they obviously have offense and defense on both those teams. So Jeffrey Bassa was on the defense for one of those teams. The offensive players, the linemen for the same team, said that he was the best player at linebacker they went up against in practice. I thought he showed leadership. He looked like a natural in the middle of the defense. I thought he showed up in the run game, had some really nice run fits in the hole, big hits. I thought that he had some really nice moments in coverage as well. This guy to me is a very solid addition. He's almost an ideal addition for the Seahawks on day 3. I would not go, I'm really hesitant to go linebacker in day 2, but Bass is probably worth a day 2 pick for a team that's a little bit more linebacker needy than the Seahawks are. Again, assuming that they retain Ernest Jones. But I like Jeffrey Bassa. I think he's going to be a solid player. I don't think you necessarily want him to be a starter in year 1, but I think he's a really interesting, depth player for you to add to a position group that could all of a sudden become one of your best position groups if they hit another good linebacker in this year's draft. Next guy on the list. This guy has, I don't want to say I was the first person because I don't think I was, but I certainly started I definitely was on the early side of talking about Jamari Caldwell from University of Oregon. A lot of the Oregon guys showed up in this. And one of the things that, I talked about is I did an interview with him. Hopefully you guys saw that. But one of the things that really jumped out was how quick he was. He's 6'4", 342 pounds, and he just erupts at the snap. Sometimes it works against him. He would get so far forward and out over his feet that he would actually fall, and the linemen were able to kind of use his aggressiveness against him. But the athletic ability is there, and his ability to move. Gray Zabel, when I interviewed him, I asked him, who stood out to you on the defensive side? He said Jamari Caldwell. He said his side-to-side twitch. He talked about it. So, I thought Jamari Caldwell was particularly impressive, and loved seeing what he had to offer this week. Trying to see, there was a stat that came out about Jamari Caldwell. Let me see if I can find it real quick because it's worth sharing. Jamari Caldwell Zebra. See if I can. Well, the the Jamari Caldwell stat was something like he had the fastest acceleration of let me see. I gotta look for this because okay, here it is. Jamari Caldwell hit a max acceleration of 5.41 yards per second at the Senior Bowl per Zebra Sports, who does all the body-based data tracking. This is the fastest interior defensive line acceleration at the Senior Bowl or Shrine Bowl in 7 years of tracking data. Incredible burst when you're talking about 342 pounds. So again, fastest acceleration for an interior defensive lineman in 7 years. So the guy's definitely got my attention. I think that he is, in some ways, he fits more as a end, like in that sense, but he profiles as a nose tackle. And if you could have a nose tackle that's able to both anchor in the run, but then also get penetration as a pass rusher, that's a big deal. That's pretty valuable. So he becomes interesting. I don't know. Like some people are going to say he's going to sneak into the second round. I don't know. That feels a little rich for me, but third round feels like a really legitimate place to start thinking about a guy like Jamari Caldwell. And again, it depends on how many snaps you think he's going to get, because remember, everybody, NFL teams, part of how they base their grades and when they will spend a pick is how many snaps the guy is going to be on the field. And so nose tackles tend to be guys that will play 300 snaps a year instead of 700 or 800 snaps a year. So it just depends on how much they actually picture him being out on the field. All right, next. This is a guy, again, I had not heard about. I don't spend a ton of time on college football every year, but Jalen Travis, a tackle, 6'7", 341 pounds, 34.5-inch arms. This guy just was massive, and he carries the weight well. I was surprised when I saw the 341-pound number because I would have guessed 325. He's proportioned really well. Part of it's being 6'7", and he played left tackle. And the second day, I thought he was maybe the best left tackle out there. I thought he had a much better day than Josh Connerly Jr., who a lot of people still have high. I thought Josh Connerly Jr. did not have a great week, but that's a separate list. So Jalen Travis is a guy, I could absolutely see him playing right tackle if you needed him to. He's a guy that, if I'm being honest, I think he's a day 2 talent based on what I saw. If you could get him on day 3 as someone to put as another tackle, I don't think he's a guard prospect. He's not built that way. He's too high cut. I think people would get under his pads, but from a tackle perspective, I think he would be vault to the top of your list of, backups to Abe Lucas, which I think is still something you want to think about, considering George Fant's probably not going to be on the team. And you're right now, you're looking at Mike Jarrell, Stone Forsythe, hopefully, probably not on the team. So when you're looking at right tackle, I think there is some need there. I think that this is a class that you want to actually add to that group if possible. Next, another linebacker. This guy, he played well in practice, but I thought really, showed up in the game as well. Jack Kaiser from Notre Dame. This guy, I think he is someone who seems to really excel in coverage as well. He gives me a little bit of Blake Cashman vibes. Smart, savvy, moves well, understands zone coverage, able to hit a spot and break up passes. There's something about the way he moves and the way he plays that I think is going to translate really well to the NFL. Again, not a guy that I think I would really want the team to spend a day 2 pick on. And again, for people that don't remember, day 1 is first round, day 2 is second and third round, day 3 is 4th through 7th rounds. So apologies if you were wondering what I meant by day 2 and day 1 and all that stuff. But day 2 is a second and third round pick. I don't know if I'd want to spend on that. But again, the linebacker class is pretty thin. So if you do want a linebacker, you may need to spend a day 2 pick to pick one up. Next guy. Now, everyone's talking about him, so this is not going to be a surprise. But Jack Besh, what an awesome way to end that game. It felt scripted. It was so good, and maybe it was, but who cares if it was? Jack Besh, if you don't know, he lost his big brother in the New Orleans terrorist attack just not that long ago. Chose to play in this game anyway. I thought Jim Nagy and the Senior Bowl did an amazing job actually like honoring his brother. They put patches on the helmets to honor him. And then, you know, he ends up winning the game on a touchdown at the end and was named the MVP. All that's a really cool story. That's not why I have Jack Besh on this list. What I liked about Jack Besh all week, the quarterback play was not impressive for me. I was not impressed with the quarterback play. Jack Besh made those quarterbacks better because he made contested catches. He went after the ball. He took balls away from defensive backs, and he did it in the game as well. This guy was like a 66, 67% contested catcher in college. Something about those TCU receivers. Savion Williams was 88% contested catcher. But Besh is a guy that's physical. You know, you're already seeing those Puka Nacua comparisons people talked about. I think it might have been Charles Davis in the broadcast yesterday that he kind of feels like a Rams receiver. And you know, I think the Seahawks could benefit from more players like that. That's kind of what I think people would like Jake Bobo to be. Jake Bobo hasn't either gotten enough of a chance or earned enough of a chance potentially to get those opportunities. But Besh is a guy who's interesting, and I don't know exactly where he will go. I don't think as an athlete, he's definitely not a first round pick. I don't think he's a second round pick at that athletic profile. I think you start to have an option to think about him in the third round. If he goes before that, I'm kind of out. But if you were to say the Seahawks pick Jack Besh in the third round, I would be like, all right, I can see that. If they get him in day 3, that's a win. Like I think that would be a great addition. And part of the way you get more physical is not just on the offensive line. Having receivers that make those plays is a physical play and sets a tone that I think really matters for him and for the rest of the team. All right, let me check on any more super chats, any questions. No, I think we're good. Good, we're gonna keep going. So let me go on to my next. We're down to our last final five names. Of the final 5, the first one that comes up, man of the week, Gray Zabel. Gray Zabel, I've talked about a lot already. 6'5", 315 pounds, played for North Dakota State. This guy, he's won everywhere he's gone. He can play all 5 positions. And every time I say that, I hear Ray Roberts saying, I don't want guys that are cross-trained. I want, guys that majored in one position. And I get what Ray is saying. You don't want somebody who's just average at everything or, okay at everything. That's not who Gray Zabel is. This guy is a legitimately very good offensive lineman wherever you put him. And he just understands, he understands leverage. He understands how to anchor. He understands how to set and reset. And then I just love, he is a football player. You just feel it all the way through. And one of the things that jumped out to me in the game that they played, think about all the guys that left. Think about all the guys that left after one practice or 2 practices, or didn't even show up to any of the practices because they got feedback that they didn't need to, that they had made their impression. And you don't want to get hurt, and you don't want to make a bad play that leaves a sour taste in somebody's mouth. Well, Gray Zabel was everybody's player of the day 1. He shows up day 2. He does it again. Gray Zabel shows up day 3. Still doing the Gray Zabel thing. And then in the game, he's still there. Not only is he there, he starts. He played the entire game. I don't know if he probably came out for a few series, but he started at guard. He played a lot of the game at center. And I mean, this is a guy that really doesn't have to prove that much more. He made the impression that, if you were his agent, you could not have asked for a better impression from him from the first day, let alone the first few days. And he's out there playing in the trenches through that whole game. And I think that's just how he's wired. So, like, every single thing about Gray Zabel is checking a box. And I'll tell you what, folks, if you told me that the Seahawks stuck at 18 and they picked Gray Zabel, I would say, man, I wish we could have traded back and gotten him, but I'd be pretty happy to add him. I think that he's a great fit for a zone blocking team. I think he's going to be a great fit no matter what kind of blocking scheme you are. He's a good pass protector. You want to add a guy that has a likely path to being a fixture on your line for a decade. Gray Zabel's one of those guys. So, I wouldn't hate it, I guess is what I'm getting at. I think he showed that much that I think that that's not a crazy thing. He's on my list of guys that if they pick him at 18, I'm not gonna be upset about it. All right, next guy on the list, number 4. This is not ranked, so I'm not going to say that. 4 more to go, though. Demetrius Knight, linebacker. This guy showed up in the game. He showed up in practice. This is a guy, I'll shout out Colton Gale, I think, who watches the show sometimes. He asked me about Demetrius Knight. So funny. And literally, I was like, I haven't seen him yet. And then maybe 5 minutes later, he just absolutely blows a guy up who was running the ball. Maybe the biggest hit all week, and just shoulder shrugged him to the ground. And then in the game, had another big play. And so that was one where they're like, oh, you can't blitz. What was he doing? Well, he didn't blitz. He saw at the snap that what the play was. He just came screaming up the middle and absolutely decked the quarterback. So Demetrius Knight's an interesting player and an interesting linebacker. So that's 3 linebackers if you're keeping track. Nick Martin, Jeffrey Bassa, and Demetrius Knight. And that's not even including Carson Schwessinger, he was supposed to go to the Senior Bowl, but he didn't go. So I think that's 4 linebackers overall that are on my big board that I'm kind of curious about. All right, 3 to go. Darius Alexander, defensive tackle. He had a really nice week of practice. Big dude, good mover, can really get into and walk back the offensive lineman. Had a good game as well. I think he's a particularly interesting fit. He could definitely be someone that you team up with Byron Murphy for a long time and see some really interesting results. I think our buddy Rob Staten is pretty high on Darius Alexander. I think in one of his latest mocks, he had Darius Alexander going to the Seahawks at 50, I want to say. Not positive, but I think that was the case. Last 2, and again, these are in no particular order. Darian Porter. Darian Porter, cornerback. So the only cornerback I've got on this list. 6'2", like 200 pounds. He's a big guy. He ran over 22 miles an hour. The expectation is he might run in the 4.2s when he does the combine and run the 40. He has got Reek Woolen potential as a athlete. He does not have a ton of snaps at corner, and neither did Reek Woolen, but he has been a corner this whole time. He's certainly a very interesting guy. I didn't get a lot of eyes on him in coverage, so I can't say like how much I think he is on track to be a great corner. I don't need to see that to know that when you're 6'2" and you're running maybe in the 4.2s at corner, I'm interested. And the first time I saw the guy, I was like, whoa, that's an interesting body type for a corner. So he's a little thicker than Reek Woolen. I think a little bit better suited to be in run support than Reek Woolen is. But who knows how he is as a cover corner. Last guy, Aeneas Peoples, another defensive interior player, really good off the ball, quick, also very stout against the run. Just another guy that, could be as high as the 2nd round. I think he's more like a 3rd round kind of pick, but another interesting guy. So if you're keeping track, Savion Jones, Omar Norman Lotz, Jamari Caldwell, Darius Alexander, and Aeneas Peoples. Those are all guys that play on the inside. Edge players, Shamar Stewart, Savion Jones can do the edge a little bit. RJ Obin, Olufemi Oladejo are the edge guys that I highlighted. Linebackers we talked about, Nick Martin, Jeffrey Bassa, Jack Kaiser, and Demetrius Knight. And then guards, guys that can play on the interior. Let's just talk interior offensive linemen. Miles Frazier, Jonah Monheim at center, Miles Frazier at guard. We've got Gray Zabel, who can play any of the line positions, but I think his best position is going to be guard or center. And those are the interior guys. We've got Jalen Travis as the tackle, the only tackle I've really got on here that jumped out for me. Doesn't mean that there weren't others, but that was the guy that I kind of picked as a favorite. And then Darian Porter is the only cornerback that I've got on the list. So that was, if I had actually gone ahead and counted before, I might have done 20 instead of 19 players. I'll give you one more, just to make it an even 20. Another guy that for me, by the way, and Jack Besh was the only receiver on my list. The other guy that I liked this week that I will keep an eye on. I want to see more of, but I want to keep an eye on. Was Elijah Arroyo. So I think he's a guy that is a really great tight end prospect, obviously a great mover, had a nice week of practice. I thought he and Terrence Ferguson both had good weeks, and Ferguson was nowhere to be seen by the time later in the week, so I think he got what he needed done. But that's another guy that I would call out as someone who stood out to me. So those are some of the names. I'll share over time, some of the guys that maybe did not jump up as much for me as I would have hoped. For example, like Jonas Avenaya, I just don't think he's a tackle. I think he's a guard. And I think that, to me, reduces his value a little bit, not just because that's not a position he can play, but because of what I saw from a pass protection standpoint. Gives me some concerns. And so what I like about tackles that can play guard is that if they can hold up in pass pro as a right tackle, their potential to be a good, plus pass protecting guard is much higher. If you're a liability at right tackle as a pass protector, then you might be okay as a pass protector inside, or even good, but it's not as much of an indicator, right? You don't have this indicator to look at and say, well, hey, they were already when they had no one on the outside shoulder, they were able to pass protect well. Of course, they're going to pass protect well when they've got players on either side of them. You don't really have that with a guy like Jonas Avenaya at this point. I think he is a real liability as a right tackle pass protector, and so that changed a little bit. Wyatt Millam's a guy that I had kind of higher hopes for coming into the week. I thought he had a pretty tough week. Josh Connerly Jr. was a guy I had high hopes for. Didn't really do it for me. There's a couple other guys that Jalen Milrose, probably the top of the list of the guys that I was really hoping I would be impressed by. I don't know if you guys watched the game, but he did in the game exactly what he'd been doing in practice. He got sacked 3 times. He was inaccurate with his short throws. I don't see it. I think it's a very specific type of team he's going to have to join in order to be successful. I don't think the Seahawks are that team, at least at this point. So I don't think he's a great option for the Seahawks. Deon Walker is a guy that I came in very excited about, left feeling like he's a very specific kind of project, and he's going to be boom or bust. Either they're going to figure out how to teach him the right pad level, or he's just going to wash out and just not work in the NFL. So I don't think he's not even a day 2 pick at this point. I think he's like a 4th or 5th round kind of player that you have to, he has a really high ceiling, but his floor is really low. So that was a guy that kind of fell back to earth for me. Ariante Ursary is a guy I was interested in. I left feeling like very different than a lot of people. I think Ursary is a good run blocker, but is a liability as a pass protector. His balance is off. His hands and feet are not working together. He got run around and run over a couple times. That's why, to me, he's like a Jermaine Ifedi, maybe like a James Carpenter, where, maybe they're okay as run blockers, but pass protection is really questionable. So those are a couple of the guys that I would just say, maybe didn't jump out to me quite as much. All right. Well, I see a question from Old School, and Old School gets preferential treatment for all that he's done over this past year. He says, a few weeks ago, before you left, you mentioned Walter Nolan and Jordan Burch as people you wanted to see. Did you see them? So, different answers for both of those guys. Walter Nolan, yes, I saw him, and I liked Walter Nolan. He is a little bit undersized. I'm not sure he's a perfect fit for this scheme that the Seahawks run. I don't think that he seems like someone that can put on the weight that I think he would need to in this scheme. He's going to be disruptive. I think he's going to be successful for a team. I'm just not sure the Seahawks are the team for him. But yeah, I think he's an interesting player. As far as Jordan Burch, it was disappointing. He didn't come. So I don't know the reason. I didn't look into it, but he was not there. And I really wanted to see what he looked like in this setting. We're not going to get a chance to. So I'm guessing maybe one of the reasons is I wouldn't be surprised if he's cutting weight for the combine and he wants to have the weigh-in done there. I think the ideal thing for him is to weigh in at like 275. He, in some places, had him at like 295. If he's in the 270s and he can then also run faster, maybe his 40 time, he wants to get down into the, if he can get into the 4.6s even, that would be huge for him. Then I think his draft stock could go much higher. So, that's my best guess, but I did not get a look at Jordan Burch. So appreciate the question. Good one from Old School Seahawk. All right, folks, if you haven't already, make sure you give the show a like and click subscribe. And it's been a little while since I've shouted out JK Boots. We had another person purchase last night. Use code HawkBlogger. Get 10% off. Gets you the best boots you're going to ever own. They are handmade by the best boot crafters maybe ever anywhere. They're in Spokane, Washington. In fact, the whole family came from the Ukraine and started this business in Spokane, in Washington. And it's grown into like one of the preeminent boot makers in the world. So love what they do. Love the folks over there. Code HawkBlogger gets you 10% off. Also, I think when we get to 100 boots sold, hopefully we're going to give away a bunch of HawkBlogger memberships as one of the things we're thinking about doing. We're going to try to maybe get on some additional guest appearances during the draft season. So we're going to keep finding ways to support the show and also get, you guys value, not just from getting great boots, but also investing back into the show and giving you great content. So go over to JK Boots, use code HawkBlogger. You will not be sorry. All right, you can see from the snow cam, we've kind of slowed to a drip, and hopefully you enjoyed getting a little bit of a view of what's going on out there. I really appreciate everybody tuning in. It was nice to not be coughing and blowing my nose the whole time. Hopefully that was good for you as well. And then I will see you all very soon, tomorrow, in fact. Not sure what I'll do tomorrow. I'm still working through that. Tuesday, though, first show with Dane Brugler will be on Tuesday morning. I'm going to start the show at 7 a.m. He will be with us at 7:30 a.m. Pacific time, so keep an eye out for that. Really eager to hear what Dane thought about the players this week and how much it matched mine. That's part of why I wanted to get my thoughts out there ahead of time, because I don't want you to think I'm changing my opinion just because Dane has a different point of view. We all got different views, and Dane is one of the best, maybe the best, that does this. So take care, everybody. Until I see you, have a great Sunday.